I feel like he's learning to make do and he's adjusting and he's learning. And like you said about the long preseason that he's getting a longer look at these players.
While some are growing frustrated with Ruben Amorim and his side's inability to generate momentum, others are assessing the growth of his squad and the development of his philosophy from a broader perspective. We're chatting about the performance in the latest Manchester derby, the news of a post-season tour, and the allure of a midweek trip to France. That and much more on the latest episode of your Theatre of Red. With 7 fixtures remaining in a forgettable Premier League campaign, the Manchester United faithful continue to reflect on what could have been in the 196th Manchester derby. A first scoreless draw in 13 meetings since December 2020 left many frustrated, with Ruben Amorim collecting his fair share of critics following back-to-back league outings without a goal. Joining me today to digest proceedings is a former journalist and writer with publications like the BBC, NBC and the Atheltic, all the way from Australia, Mr. Adam Joseph. How is everything with you, my man?
Yeah, going well. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Before we dive into the weekend's action, I feel it's only fitting that we begin with the breaking news about Manchester United's first post-season tour of the modern era. And that is obviously a trip to Kuala Lumpur on the 28th of May before travelling to play in Hong Kong on the 30th. Now, Omar Barada has focused on the financial benefits of such a trip with the aim of bolstering the playing squad coming to the fore. And Chris Wheeler has since confirmed that the club stands to make £8 million for the 3-day excursion. We all know that money talks. The damage of close to 2 decades of Glazer mismanagement has essentially forced the hand of the club to take the trip directly after the final game of the Premier League season. Inevitably, it will allow supporters in the region a possible once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see their idols. But then at the same time, it adds further evidence for the hideous financial damage caused that Manchester United are being forced into these measures to make £8 million. Ironically, in what is our first chat on the Theatre of Red, these fixtures will play out closer to you than they will to me. What are your thoughts on the games, the postseason tour, and will you consider making the trip yourself?
I won't be making the trip. I don't think my wife would be allowing me to do that. But initially, I think the reaction to any postseason friendlies that we've seen in previous years with Newcastle and Tottenham and what they've done, there's always been the criticism it's a cash grab, and let's be realistic, that's what it is. But this is a result, as you said, of years of financial mismanagement. The hand is forced. I think ideally, no team wants to be making postseason trips with the amount of football that's played in such a short period of time in the season, the games that it feels like, they play 3 times a week every week. But more importantly, I would say that this was actually pointed out by Scott Saunders in the immediate aftermath of the decision. And that's that there's no international tournaments this summer. The players aren't going off to camps prior to a tournament this time. It's a summer off, a summer of rest. So a postseason tour that brings in income to the club actually comes at the right time. So I'm willing to sort of change my thought, because initially I was quite cynical about it. Although I understood the money aspect, I just thought they played so much football, let them rest. But I'm coming around to the idea. What do you think?
I think there's pros and cons to it. As somebody who's been so frustrated for so long with the mismanagement of the football club, having to entertain this just adds further frustration to what is already a disgruntled supporter base. Because you're going to have the ideals of a certain subsection of support looking at the fact that there has been the long season that you've made mention to, particularly when things have been as bad as they have been, that the players should be given as much rest before they enter into a proper pre-season, which Ruben Amorim was not allowed because he wasn't around. But then in the other aspect of things, we're looking at the squad and continuous talking points of financial fair play and the Premier League's profit of sustainability rules. Realistically, if we can get £8 million into the club for a 3-day excursion, which, let's be honest about it, it's not going to be all first team. You're going to have an amalgamation of first team and youth team players. There will be a raucous environment there with a very Manchester United heavy supporter base out in that particular region. I have one time in my life been in the general vicinity, and that's actually when I was traveling to Australia 15 or 16 years ago, and we went through Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur, and I do remember there was a massive amount of red. Manchester United was a pretty profound obsession out there. So I know it's it's going to be welcomed very much. But back in my mind, it just really, really leads back to the fact that we have to go and do this for the sake of 8 million quid, Adam. It's Manchester United shouldn't have to do this sort of thing, particularly in 2025, when you're considering the lack of £40,000 that was an annual investment towards ex-players. And then you're looking at this new Trafford and all of the cuts that have been made across the football club that we then have to go and venture off on a postseason tour directly after Aston Villa, I believe, on the last day of the season. I don't know, there's pros and cons to it. Ultimately, as you've said, there is no massive exodus of players going off for internationals. So I think in the grand scheme of things, they should get ample time to be able to rest. But inevitably, there's nothing we can do about it. And it's going to occur. Hopefully, the £8 million that's received is pumped back into the club in a way that's going to be advantageous for the squad with transfers going against PSR. And it will ultimately aid Ruben Amorim. Because, as I've alluded to previously, we are just off the back of playing out a scoreless draw with Manchester City on Sunday, which solidifies the eye-watering grasp on 13th place in the Premier League. I suppose one caveat is that it ensures that Pep's men have not earned a victory within 90 minutes of football over the previous 4 meetings. While the performance was hardly a vintage showing from either side, I do believe the Red Corner offered far more in terms of a desire to claim 3 points and were by and large the better outfit for the majority of the fixture. Ultimately, we saw the same old issues surface throughout the game, as we have grown all too aware of this season, and that is of course an inability to convert promising passages of play and smooth transitions into meaningful actions in the final third. Inevitably, in a fixture that once more saw Bruno Fernandes state his case as one of the very finest players in the game, the majority left Old Trafford feeling as though the 3 points were there for the taking, and a more settled group would have dispatched City with ease. Considering everything from the possibility of a penalty within the opening minute to further evidence of a better understanding of Amorim's system, what were your thoughts on the game and the performance, Adam?
Oh, how to narrow them down. So firstly, it was definitely the worst City side I can remember playing in a long time. They just looked nothing like the other teams that have come to Old Trafford, and honestly embarrassed multiple managers, multiple Manchester United sides in the last decade, or under Pep, the majority of the last decade. For United, I was more concerned that they just, the first half, the passing was disastrous. It was like they were trying to pass it 100 yards, not 10. They just couldn't complete the most simple of things. There was just the lack of quality in the final third. So while they had lots of shots, the quality of those chances wasn't quite to the level where you would have expected them to necessarily be finished. I mean, the best chance of the game was arguably the deflected ball that fell to Phil Foden that Mazraoui got in last ditch on. So it's a variety of things. I can understand the more cynical point of view on it. For me, I'm always more sunny side up. While not getting a result is frustrating, and I think we're at the point in the season and under Ruben Amorim where we're just not accepting anything but results and good performances hand in hand. We're starting to see more glimpses of what a team more fitted to his tactics and his system will look like. But unfortunately, it's still a case of too much being left to too few. So as you said about Bruno Fernandes, he's playing right now as arguably the most complete version of him we've seen. And we've seen some pretty good versions of Bruno over the years. But alongside, off the top of my head, Casemiro, Diogo Dalot was solid again after what is, would say, a lean period through the season. But there just wasn't enough individual quality to lift the team up and get a result.
You're making reference to performance. I know it's a desperate thing to say when we're only at the start of April, but performances are probably more important than results at this moment in time. Obviously, you want to win. You want to get 3 points, especially against Manchester City or any of your rivals like Liverpool or that, particularly when you can potentially jeopardise Manchester City's European qualification aspirations for next season. What I said last week on the podcast is that Amorim has essentially been granted a prolonged pre-season here. He's been given ample time to be able to build further confidence in his structure and his system, and allow the players such as Bruno to further enhance their role within the side. Now, there is clear evidence of certain individuals that are growing week on week, and maybe you can see evidence of other individuals that maybe don't have a place in the starting 11 or the squad and moving forward, particularly when we need to alleviate a lot of the financial expenditure to be able to accommodate PSR. The one thing that stands out to me largely, particularly across social media after the result, Adam, was the amount amount of backlash that Amorim is now receiving. There seems to be an acceleration from what was a very small pocket of subsections of support that were delivering damning reports about Amorim's philosophy to a growing contingent that are looking at him being everything from stubborn to being incapable of being able to alter his philosophy and his mindset. For me, I'm looking at this as an overall as best as I possibly can. I'm taking it that the man has come to the football club and inherited a squad that was built for System A, and he quite clearly is a manager for System B. The hierarchy would have known full well what this man was all about before he arrived and before he signed on the dotted line. It was never going to be this expectation that we want to pluck you away from one of the most successful teams in sporting, bring you into our environment and expect you to be able to upend your entire philosophy, particularly when you're bringing your coaching department with you. What is your thought about how so many people seem to have forgotten that this man was not just brought in to play a certain style of football, he was brought in to play his style of football, and that inevitably when you're trying to do this, it's going to take time, and that it can't just happen like flicking on a light switch.
It comes from a place of frustration. What we're used to seeing at Old Trafford, you can resort to things like cliches of the United way and attacking and like attacking football and things like that. But for me, I think I don't worry too much about like the 3 at the back, 5 at the back. I think systems and formations are largely for us to play FIFA or see in pre-game. I don't worry too much about that. It's more about your role within the system and what the overall scheme is designed to do. In terms of the backlash he receives, I've always sort of considered that sort of thing, and it's increasingly so in a more just an impatient sporting landscape is, what have you done for me lately? And what that's become, in my opinion, and I've been stronger on this more now than ever, is what have you done for me in the last 90 minutes? You only need to look at the way that Patrick Dorgu is being treated, more than a couple of months into his tenure at the club. It's the same thing that's happened to Ruben Amorim. So we already knew when Ruben Amorim joined the club that we were going to face pain and difficulty. To this extent, no. Nobody expected disaster of this magnitude, but it speaks more to the house of cards at the club falling apart. And that's not his fault. Like you said, he's got a squad that I don't even think is designed for one system. Some of it is the remnants of counter-attacking football. You've got players like Bruno Fernandes who thrive in any system, but a lot of players, or as a collective, they don't really fit together in any foreseeable way. So for me, you're just trying to scrap something together. And it's interesting what you said about him being perceived as stubborn. I actually don't see that. I don't consider him to be rigid or stubborn. I think he's quite pragmatic and willing to adjust. Look at the changes, and the Athletic wrote about this recently, the changes in Onana's distribution from more short passing in his early days to searching out more long balls, like quite a high volume of long balls. Look at the adjustments for Casemiro that have been made. Initially, he didn't fit in the system at all. We only have to go back to that game against Newcastle in January to look how he struggled. I mean, I know that was alongside Christian Eriksen, but his flaws were like put under a microscope, whereas now we're moving towards the sort of thing where players' strengths are being more, maximized. Not entirely maximized, but I feel like he's learning to make do and he's adjusting and he's learning. And like you said about the long preseason that he's getting a longer look at these players. And that's almost another way you can look at the postseason tour. It's a chance to get a more of a look at the youth team players. They are going to be playing local opposition, but we don't know how much he'll get to audition those younger players in first team football the rest of the season. It really depends on the Europa League, the progression in that, and how much he has to rotate in the league. We've got the game against Newcastle, which is a really tight turnaround. How much will he rotate players then? So I find it really frustrating, but it comes from sometimes people aren't really upset about that, or sometimes they just want to soapbox about things they were already upset about, or managers they wanted to succeed, whether it was even far back as Ole or Eric Ten Hag, or they've just never been convinced by Amorim, so they just want to be right. So they're almost celebrating his demise rather than supporting the club.
Ultimately, I think when you sit back with a calm head and you assess where we are as a team, there are clear indicators of improvement tactically, and the players are moving the ball better within this new look system. However, as I alluded to from the off, the final third is where the fulcrum of our issues are landing. And anybody who engages with me online and is a follower of the podcast will know about my feelings regarding the likes of Rasmus Højlund as a striker. And I do believe genuinely that his lack of confidence is a byproduct of being denied any form of service for months on end. As I reported several weeks ago, ago. The club currently holds no plans of selling him in the summer because they are aware of the situation at play. Now, PSR, as I've mentioned several times, is always going to dictate matters regarding the inevitable rebuild for Amorim and the funds required to support his vision. That said, Højlund was completely anonymous against City once more, and Alejandro Garnacho, who ironically has contributed to so much of the lack of service for Højlund or Xerxes, again offered little to nothing in the final third other than misplaced passes, idle crosses and blocked efforts on goal. With this subsection that we keep mentioning, that is latching onto the words of, we'll say, the likes of Gary Neville and Roy Keane, and Amorim being declared everything from stubborn, as I said, to incapable of managing in the Premier League, we appear to have now entered Groundhog Day, and certain individuals will not be told otherwise. We've witnessed the return of Mason Mount following a prolonged period on the physio table, with Kobbie Mainoo said to be available for selection very shortly. Given what appears to be a wealth of options to fill both of the number 10 positions, can you envisage any dynamic that can return a semblance of a successful attacking unit between now and the remainder of the campaign?
For me, it's more than just that front three. It's how the wing backs are incorporated. You know, we've seen the lack of chemistry between Patrick Dorgu and Alejandro Garnacho because, you know, and Garnacho is in a similar situation to Højlund where they're so heavily relied on as these young players that they're just not ready for that. Like, I know Garnacho has played a wealth more of senior football than, you know, the likes of Rasmus Højlund or Patrick Dorgu, but he's played so much football in the last 18 months. He looks like a player who's not only bereft of confidence, but frankly exhausted because he makes the same repeat mistakes and decisions. That to me is someone who's, again, exhausted. So I think, for one, you need to return Garnacho to the right side, particularly if you are going to get the most out of Patrick Dorgu. He needs players on that side, whether it's Joshua Xerxes, Bruno Fernandes, that he can link with and interplay with. I just don't see that with Garnacho. And we've seen Garnacho under Erik ten Hag thrive on that right side when his decision-making is simplified and he's doing things that are really more based within what the team needs, especially because Diogo Dalot doesn't always offer the most width on the right-hand side. He has more space to operate and provide that with. So for me, it's figuring out, where does Bruno Fernandes play? Because he's played really good football in the centre of midfield, dropping deep, but also we know of his chance creation quality in the final third. All of the things that he can do in the final third, it's a really tricky balancing act, not to mention that Højlund's bereft of confidence, which is making him develop bad habits, whether it's forcing things, running into the wrong channels. And his body language just shows a player who is just really struggling with the weight of that expectation because he's been thrust into a role he's just not ready for. And that's hopefully something that Ineos have recognised. And as you reported recently, he's not going anywhere. He has a shade under £40 million left on his book value. And it makes no sense to try and move a distressed asset. I think that's one of the things that we forget about sometimes in squad building with the emotion and irrationality of fandom, that we want to get rid of players who are out of form, we'll assume that we're going to get this certain price for them, but who's going to want to buy a distressed asset at a premium? It's just not realistic. So yeah, in terms of the attack, I know I've gone roundabout on your question, but it's a whole team problem to me. It's how do you find the players that work best together? What's the midfield combination? Casemiro has arguably gone past Manuel Ugarte in the past month or so and been the clear choice as that defensive midfielder alongside of Bruno Fernandes. So it's finding that pairing, whether it's Casemiro and Mainoo, because Mainoo and Ugarte have struggled together. Does that open up more for Bruno as a 10, Joshua Xerxes as a 10, and again, you mentioned Mason Mount, who I hadn't even considered yet. But I do think of Mount more as a bonus option at this point because you can't really squad plan for a player who is so injury prone. I think anything he contributes in building that match fitness, much like Luke Shaw, is a bonus right now. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but their bodies have just failed them time and again. And you don't want to thrust them into too much football too soon with how often the team has games the rest of the season.
A valid point. And regarding Mason Mount, he's an individual that I've been so vocal about across every platform that you will find me sprawling, whether it's text or whether it's voice. As I stated last week, when it became clear that Mason Mount was a consideration for Manchester United, I really invested in picking up what he could actually offer to a Manchester United side. Obviously, at the time, it was under Erik ten Hag. But Mason Mount, he's got such beautiful characteristics and such beautiful attributes. I actually think he's tailor-made to both Ten Hag's Ajax system and Ruben Amorim's system that he's trying to employ in Manchester United. Injuries have obviously curtailed any form of growth, and it's been horrific to see. But given the words that we have seen from Amorim about his preparation, his ideology as a professional footballer and as an athlete, if he can stay fit, then it almost seems guaranteed that he's going to be occupying one of these 10s. And as you said about Bruno Fernandes, he's absolutely a starter. He's the first name on the team sheet. It's just trying to find where he's better playing, because he can seem to operate in a perfectly functioning manner, whether he's further up the field or whether he's further back the field. We saw it against City, that after about 70 minutes, he dropped deeper, and he did so to accommodate Mason Mount entering the field and taking one of those more advanced positions. And even when Bruno dropped deeper, he was able to orchestrate matters even more pivotally from that deeper lying role. It's good that you mentioned Casemiro and Ugarte. Now, Casemiro obviously was given further options because Ugarte fell back an injury ever so slightly. I think defensively, we're seeing the best form of Casemiro that we've seen in over a year. But that is where it really stops, because as a professional in an elite environment, he's almost certainly moving on at the end of the season. And he's very limited in what he can do in terms of advancing the ball forward and attacking at this stage of his career. Defensively, he's been fantastic. Ugarte is kind of that mix in between both, because he's showing ample signs of defensive coherence. I believe there's been no player in the Premier League who's covered more grass in that position than Ugarte this season, but he's still green in what he's trying to do in acclimatizing to English football, and his distribution is not the best. On the football, he's left a little bit lacking this year. But one player that I am absolutely fascinated about, because every bit of information that I'm receiving from Carrington is that both the player, his representatives, and the football club do remain very much towards signing a deal and tying down his long-term future is Kobbie Mainoo. Everything that I'm told suggests that Mainoo does not want to leave. Now, there is ample questions about where he fits into this system because of his style, be that a lack of athleticism that Amorim would probably want from a central holding player. But we've also seen that he has the capacity to function in a more further lying role in a 10 because he is so technically gifted. He's now broaching return, and there was the possibility that he was going to feature in a matchday squad against Manchester City. But it seems almost certain that over the next week or two, we're going to see Mainoo return to that squad. Can you see a place for Mainoo within Amorim's system?
Yeah, I think unquestionably he has a place in Ruben Amorim's system, preferably as the more advanced of the two central midfielders. I think he's the one as the more primary attacking role. For me, I see Kobbie Mainoo as an 8, and that's the function of that second role, that role that Bruno's sort of playing now. He just needs to slowly expand his game. And the thing we have to give a little bit more credit to, and you would know this better than most, is that we have to give him time to develop. He's having a little bit of second season blues, whether that's returning from injury. He's had his first major injury this season as well. And I think sometimes we don't have the patience to give players a chance to return 100% physically just because they've returned from injury. Like, especially a young player, they're still learning about their bodies. And we don't give enough credit to that. I mean, he doesn't turn 20 for 2 more weeks, as I said. And there's this impatience. And much like you, and you have really reliable reporting on this, is that he doesn't want to go. And I think we have to understand sometimes when things are played out in the media, it has nothing to do with the player. I've been pretty strong that irrespective of where the briefs come from, whether it's from the players' representatives, the football club itself, or rivals trying to unsettle the player, it's just how things are played out sometimes. But ultimately, it's a player who's signed through 2027 with that player option through 2028. We've just got to just relax a little bit. I mean, people said Bruno Fernandes wasn't going to fit into Ruben Amorim's system, and arguably, his is the most complete version of Bruno Fernandes we've seen. So there's this need to be strong on our opinions and this reactionary nature in takes, but I think Kobbie Mainoo is going to be just fine. And the best thing about it is he can play in that 10 role. We saw at FCSB what he can do in that 10 role when you need a player who's great in tight spaces and with the dribbling he has in close. So I don't think there's a need to pin him down anywhere. But for me, I think the long-term fit is the 8. He just has to develop that switching, that long-range passing, and just a few little aspects to his game, as well as building his endurance for that role. And that's why someone like Bruno Fernandes thrives so much there now.
I agree. And I think, look, I adore Kobbie Mainoo. I've made that clear for quite some time. If you want one tailored transition which highlights just how he can contribute to every aspect of a transition, just look at that goal against City in the FA Cup final. He was on hand to claim the ball just outside the defensive area. He was key in the build-up and the transition, and ultimately found himself in the box to finish that sublime no-look pass from Bruno Fernandes. Critically, individuals are very trigger-happy when it comes to whether a player will succeed or whether they won't succeed. We discussed the standouts with Bruno, the marquee player on the field, particularly when he dropped deeper to facilitate the introduction of Mount. Outside of Menu and outside of Bruno and Mount in the attacking aspects, you've rightfully made mention to the fact about how the other area of the field are also critical. Several other contributors left their mark on that tie. You got the likes of Nasser Mazraoui and Lenny Yoro shining particularly bright once more, and focusing specifically on the young Frenchman, who's now made back-to-back Premier League starts following 5 appearances from 6 in the league. We're witnessing everything from the growth of his defensive capabilities to his confidence in distribution and his ability to carry the ball 50, 60 yards out of pressure deep into the final third of play. We know that Madrid wanted him, and while that is not the sole barometer of a talented player, really and truly it does offer more than a hint of an idea about his ability. And for those who don't spend hours digesting the continental game, his early performances may have left some uncertain in England, but this is a boy who earned the title of Baby Varane, and you don't just get that title. What we saw against City was 40 out of 45, I believe, completed passes. He made 3 interceptions, which obviously indicates undeniable promise, although his adaptation to the physical nature of the league is clear with him being out-muscled in his 4 ground duels. But overall, what have you made of his growth and acclimatising to the English game throughout his 23 appearances this season? Because people do forget that. It has been a season, but he has only featured on 23 occasions, and I would like to think, Adam, that his growth is very, very noticeable from day one to where we are right now.
Yeah, I mean, even if we look at how he's performed since the Southampton game where he struggled against Sulemana, that was like I think that was his moment where we're reminded that he's still a little bit raw, but his adjustment since then has been awesome. He's getting used to more of the pace of English football and the physicality, and that's going to take some time with his age and physical development. But we're seeing a player getting more comfortable in distribution. His timing in the tackle has always been really good. His anticipation, his recovery tackle and his recovery pace are really impressive. He's not rash at all. He's so composed, and I guess that's why he gets that Baby Varane moniker, because he has all those traits that Rafa did at a young age, and I've really enjoyed it. Obviously, the foot injury set him back, but he's adapted really well ever since. They were patient with him returning, and then they weren't quick to incorporate him into the team either. And one of the things I like most about Yoro, and it's the same thing about Kobbie Mainoo, is we don't know his best position yet. We don't know if in a Ruben Amorim system, if he's going to be that central centre-back, because he can. One of the things we saw in that first friendly against Rangers before he got injured was his ability to switch the ball. So is he going to be more suited to that wide space defending in the wide centre-back role where he can work with the wing-backs and do a little bit more distribution in that aspect, or is it going to be from the middle and marshalling the back 3? So I'm really curious. That's one of the exciting things about it is players like Yoro and Mainoo, their ceilings right now are unknowable, but their potential is so high. So I think it's always funny to me, and I actually quoted a tweet this morning in defense of Yoro because he got criticism after that Southampton game that was totally unjust and reactionary that he's made look silly just a couple of months later.
No, it was a baptism by fire in that game that you're speaking about. But the crucial point, there's so many young first team players in this squad. Realistically speaking, even when you're considering the likes of Aiden Heaven, there is so much growth here. There's potential, and the potential is on show on a weekly basis, but it is potential. It's raw potential in many ways, very similar to Patrick Dorgu. This is a player that has come under scrutiny, as you said. These are raw, talented youngsters that are trying to acclimatise to a new surrounding in the most difficult competition in domestic football. And it's just part and parcel of it. That will lead me on to what I want to speak about next, because we have to get to France. And with Ruben Amorim, since his arrival in November, he's overseen 30 fixtures in the Manchester United hot seat. He's won 12, lost 10, drawn 8. Which equates to a 40% win ratio. However, I can't help but feel that far too many are allowing their emotions to get the better of them when they're analysing their expectations for this group at this time with everything that has been and gone in the Northwest. Domestically, it's been a shambles, and nobody is going to deny that, Adam. We need to see growth and something to cling on to during difficult periods, and it's why we look for green shoots in performances. Ahead of Thursday's trip to France to face what is now 5th place Lyon in the quarterfinal of the Europa League, I believe there is a genuine opportunity for the former Sporting man to lead this side to continental glory and deliver an unlikely piece of Champions League qualifying silverware. Lyon are enjoying some good form in recent weeks, winning 4 of their previous 5 in all competitions, but they have conceded 7 goals in that time, including 4 against Strasbourg last week. The importance of this fixture cannot be overstated for Amorim. Also, towards a summer window that requires financial boosts, how do you see the players responding to everything we've discussed against Lyon on Thursday?
Well, I think there's reason for optimism. I've been optimistic on the Europa League for a while. I think it's where Ruben Amorim's team has performed best. I think it exposes least the physical limitations of the squad. I think they've played their best football. We saw that against the 2 legs against Real Sociedad. So I have the expectation that United will win the Europa League. I think that's okay to have that expectation. It's not to say they're guaranteed to win it. Nothing is a guarantee, but look at the other teams in the draw. They're all beatable. And I'm quite confident going into Thursday's game. Lyon are in good form, but they have had an up and down season, much like United. United's domestic campaign goes without saying. No one's hiding from the embarrassment. We can't. It's under a microscope all the time. It's the talk of major media outlets all the time. It's the talk of rival fans all the time. Every time I talk about a rival club, they're like, worry about being in 13th. It's their go-to. But the Europa League presents a real opportunity, and we know the financial implications as well as the continental implications. It's £100 million difference in revenue. What that does for where the club sits in the immediate term, what it does for Ruben Amorim's rebuild is the gap is so gigantic. It's, as you said, the importance of the Europa League can't be overstated. But I think there's reason for real confidence. They do have to limit Ryan Cherky. I'm curious as to how they go about that. But if they can do that, and he's been the best player in the Europa League this season alongside Bruno Fernandes, has created the most chances, has the highest average rating on most statistical websites. If they can do that, that's going to go a long way. But they have to get rid of those brain fades that cost them, because that's been like the hallmark, is those lack of intelligent moments where they just break down and it's defined by one mistake. Even if you look at what happened against Forest, that came from a lack of understanding that a quick tactical foul in that scenario on Anthony Langer shuts down that moment. And at the moment, what we've seen throughout Ruben Amorim's tenure is those defensive lapses and mistakes have just been so costly, because they have defended quite solidly, but then they've switched off for 5 minutes or made a catastrophic error, and it's cost them dearly time and again.
I like that you mentioned that, because it was one notable aspect when Mount entered the field against Manchester City, because he was booked within 90 seconds for that exact thing. He made one of those tactical fouls and took one for the team. It was a breath of fresh air to see that bit of common sense there. I don't think you're being anyway outrageous in saying that Manchester United could and should go on and win the Europa League, because let's be honest about things. With the very best of respect to every other team in the competition, Lazio, Bodo Glimt, Lyon, Eintracht Frankfurt, Spurs, Athletic Bilbao, Rangers. There's none of those teams that Manchester United shouldn't be beating. I know this Manchester United have gone through quite the traumatic period throughout this particular season. It's the most forgettable in recent memory, but they're still unbeaten in Europe's second-tier competition, and that's the way it should be for Manchester United. Now, I know it's tricky, but given everything that we have discussed and what we know about the capabilities of this side in the Europa League this season, I'm going to put it to you. How do you see it playing out on Thursday?
What I've said all along is that I'd expect a strong result, be it a draw or a win, and then they win at Old Trafford next week and finish the tie. So if they can replicate what they did against Real Sociedad, which for that first 70 minutes was really good football, and then obviously everything changed after that. But if they can replicate that level of performance, I have not much worry about them getting a strong result, whether it's a draw or a win. What about you?
I think it's one of those that could, because it's over in France, you're going to be going up against a Partizan's backdrop. There's going to be really, really rabid supporters in there. It's going to act as a 12th man. So it's one of those that could end up as a score draw. But at the same time, I wouldn't be overly surprised if United went behind early and then came back to Old Trafford with a 2 or 3-1 lead. I think United are a better team. Yes, Lyon have got plenty about them. They got plenty to worry about. But Manchester United are a good team. And even though it's been disgruntled play throughout the majority of the season. There's so many quality players that Manchester United can call on, particularly with one of the most informed players in the world in Bruno Fernandes. So I would be confident of a positive performance first and foremost, and a more than positive result to take back to Old Trafford. So that is what I will go with, and hopefully I'm not licking my wounds next week after that. But Adam, it has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you on the Theatre of Red, my man. For any listener who may want to get in touch with you, how can they do so? And what have you got coming up in your world over the coming weeks?
These days, I'm mainly enjoying retirement, but thanks to Ed over at No Question About That, I'm doing some guest hosting, so really enjoying that. So you can find the link in my bio to Ed's account, and you can do all your subscribing there, whether it's YouTube or Spotify. Really enjoying getting back into the swing of things and stretching some old muscles there. But mostly just trying to speak some common sense on Twitter, some common sense trolling, if you will. But yeah, no, you can find me there. You'll see me about. I tend to be all over the place these days. But thanks for having me. It's a real honor. You and I have spoken for a long time about doing this, and I've really enjoyed getting the opportunity to come and have a chat today.
Likewise, it's something I've been looking forward to. It's not been the easiest thing in the world with the time zone differential, but it has been far overdue. I very much enjoyed it, and I hope everyone listening today has enjoyed it as well, because as you can all hear, Adam he's leveled. He's a good guy. He's proper red. He knows what he's talking about. So it is worthwhile dropping him a follow on Twitter, getting involved with his own podcast, and saying hello, because he won't bite you unless you ask him. And as always, you can connect with us at the theatre_of_red on every social channel and keep up to date with the website for daily news, Carrington exclusives, and in-depth analysis. Please subscribe wherever you're listening today. I know I say it every week and I sound a bit desperate, but if you would be as kind as to leave a 5-star review, that would also be much appreciated to help the platform grow. We will be back next week to catch up on the latest comings and goings in the world of Manchester United. Stay safe. Thank you all very much for tuning in.